Hi, this is a quick video to show how to set up an IPsec tunnel from OCI to OCI Classic using Openswan. The reason we're using Openswan is because the VPN as a service in OCI doesn't support NAT, which is required to set up a VPN tunnel to the Current Service Gateway in OCI Classic. And a quick look at the infrastructure on OCI, we have a VCN, and the VCN is broken into two subnets, public subnet and private subnet. The public subnet has two VNICs, one for the Bastion host and then the one side of our Openswan gateway. And these VNICs have NAT IPs, so they are reachable over the internet. And we can see we have a default route that points to the internet gateway for internet access. The private subnet has no internet access. We have two VNICs, the LAN side of the Openswan VM, and then the VM that we have created to test. And the only route it has is a VPN route that says to get to the remote subnet, go via the Openswan VPN gateway. Now I've set up this environment in OCI with some security lists, and the private subnet will accept traffic from public subnet and the remote subnet. And I require access from public subnet because we want to configure this VM via this bastion. So the admin access goes via the internet SSH session into the bastion and then port forwarding to VM so we can configure it. And for the Openswan, we just get direct SSH internet access to configure it. The OCI side is quite straightforward. We have a Currente service gateway that is configured in the dual home mode, and it's got an IP network with this VM attached to it. So the end goal is to get IP reachability from this subnet to this subnet from Openswan to Currente service gateway. Now, a quick look at the environment that we have here. Um, On the OCI console, you can see I've created three VMs, corresponds to our Bastion, the VM, and then the Openswan. These are the three instances running. Now, there's a couple of things we need to do here. We need to create this route. So we can do that by going under network. I only started configuring this. I haven't completed it. So this is the VPN route. And basically, we need to create a route saying to get to this subnet, go via a private IP, which is the .200 IP address of the Openswan VPN gateway. And we can click on create. And that's that. And I have here a terminal session that has I've logged into the Openswan, the VM, and then the remote VM on the other side, which is VM OCIC on the OCI Classic. And these are all the VMs. We have the IP address 172.16.1.2. On our VM, we have IP address .150, which is this one that we have here. And then here we have IP address, which is .12, but the .200 IP address hasn't been configured yet. And this is because we still need to run a script in order to do that. So we can just SFTP the script into the Openswan instance and just double check that we have the script here. And now we can do a quick sudo bash, and it's asking if we want to configure the interface. We select one, and if we run ifconfig, we can see that we have this IP address now. A quick test to see if we can reach the .150 IP address. And reach it. So this confirms reachability. So since we've added this second VNIC now, the next step is actually to configure the IPsec parameters themselves on the OpenSwan. So I have an environment here where I have already done all the configuration to make it easy. We can just copy and paste. So a quick run through, sudo su, we install OpenSwan, we disable VPN redirects, and here we enable port forwarding. We create IP table rules to allow all traffic. We can be specific to allow traffic for our VPN, but just to make it quicker, I'm allowing all traffic. And then we'll restart the service. And then we have some commands to test the IPsec tunnel once it's configured. So we can just take all this. So it's going to take a while to install everything, but while it's installing, we can go through the other configurations. We have IPsec config, which essentially is the configuration for the IPsec parameters for this very scenario. So here is just a general config setup. We're doing NAT traversal, and here we're saying the left subnet, which is the subnet in OCI, and then the right subnet in OCI Classic. We are using perfect forward secrecy. Our authentication, we're using pre-shared keys. And then this is the WAN interface of the OpenSwan. And then this is the public IP address of the Corrente Service Gateway at the other side. And then right ID just simply says this is the pair ID of the Corrente Service Gateway at the other side. And this is our phase 1 parameter and phase 2 parameter. So 256 for encryption, SHA-1 for hash, and then Diffie-Hellman. So phase 2 itself, we're using exactly the same parameters. So encryption 256, hash, SHA-1, and then Diffie-Hellman group 2. And then the last file will be the IPsec secrets pre-shared key, which we'll configure at both ends. So going back to the script, we'll just click the last command, and then that's that. We can now go under the IPsec config and then take all this. So the first one just does, it saves the existing IPsec config file, saves it as a backup, and then we can create a new file with all these parameters inside. So we can just copy that and paste all that. And now we have, so the exact same config that we've explained earlier is what we have here on the screen. And so we can go to the secrets. So the secrets, we can just simply paste that in. And now we have our IPsec secret. So after doing this, what we need to do right now is just simply to restart the IPsec process again. We can do that by just restarting it. Okay, so now that we've done this side, we now need to configure the OCI Classic N. But before we do that, there's a couple of things we can do. We can run a TCP dump command, which targets the, so what we're doing is we want to run a TCP dump on the WAN interface, which is ENS3. So we can simply do that. TCP dump-I ENS3, and what we're looking for is port 500 or port 4500. So if we run this, we're listening, we can come back here and then we can look at what messages we have after we've configured the tunnel at the other end. So back to the OCI console, what we have is a VPN gateway which I've created, and then we will create a customer device. So in order to create the customer device, we will need some parameters from our OCI Classic. So one of the parameters, if we go back under compute, is the OpenSwan public IP address. So we just simply add a VPN device, and then we give it a name. We can call it Openswan. Openswan. We can make that Oracle Linux74. And the one IP address, the visible IP address is the public IP address, and then the one IP address itself is this IP address here. So this would be 192.168.1.2, and the subnets that are reachable on the third-party device would be this subnet. So here I want to use perfect forward secrecy, but not dead pair detection. So now that we have this config in place, we can just simply add the connection. And as you can see from here, we have the public IP address of our VPN gateway, which is this one. And this is what we'll use for our pair ID when we're creating the VPN connection. So under the connection, we can create a new VPN connection. We'll select the gateway. We'll select the device, and then we'll put the IP address as our ID. And here we can just go back and use the same pre-shared key that we have. Just copy to make sure there's no typo. And then we'll create a VPN connection. And if we go back to where we are doing the TCP DOM, you can see we are starting to receive traffic, but we can see that there are different kinds of messages. We have a phase 2 here, we have phase 1, but then we'll let it negotiate. And once this is done, we should see the status of the VPN tunnel go up. There are some other commands we can actually use to double check. We can start with IPsec status, and this gives quite some information. So under the IPsec status, you can see it gives some information on what we are trying to achieve here, but it doesn't really talk about the tunnel, whether phase 1 or phase 2. So we can try the other command. Let's do a clear to clear the screen, and then status, and you can see total IPsec connection. It says loaded 2 and then active 2. So you can see our IX security associations and then IPsec security associations. And then here we have IPsec SA established. So if we go back here and we refresh, we should see that the tunnel is up. Now that we have the tunnel up, we can just go back to test. And if you remember our scenario, we're trying to ping from this VM to the remote VM at the other side. So from this VM, if we just do a ping 172.16.1.2, you can see we have reachability. And in order to prove that this is working bidirectionally, we could ping the .150 address from the other side, 192.168.1.150, and we can reach it as well. And so this proves that we've been able to achieve reachability over the IPsec tunnel end to end.